trapped in time, cursed for eternity. But what happens when immortality is granted to a child? Claudia is no ordinary vampire. She is the embodiment of a cruel paradox, a being of eternal youth, forced to live with the mind of a predator. Born into a world where time is an unrelenting enemy, Claudia's existence is a tragic testament to the horrors of immortality, especially when bestowed upon someone who was never meant to carry its burden. Turned when she was just a little girl, Claudia's life became an endless nightmare, locked in a body that would never grow, but with thoughts, desires, and instincts that aged far too quickly. As her mind matured, her body remained childlike, forever frozen in a form that betrayed the ferocity and darkness within her. The world of vampires is already a place of profound isolation and despair. But for Claudia, her existence was a relentless prison. Unlike the adult immortals, whose bodies may grow old, but whose minds are meant to remain sharp, Claudia was forever trapped in a fragile, innocent shell. She was cursed with the hunger and power of a vampire, but without the strength or stature of an adult to wield it. Her childlike innocence was a facade that could deceive and manipulate, but also one that chained her to a life of bitter sorrow and isolation. This internal conflict between mind and body was a torment unlike any other, and it drove Claudia to the brink of madness. Her story is not just one of monstrous transformation, but one of longing and despair. From the very moment she was turned, Claudia was confronted with the harsh truth of her fate. She would never grow up. She would never experience the milestones of adulthood, the joy of love, the thrill of conquest, the peace of aging into wisdom. Instead, she would remain forever locked in a child's body, cursed with the sharp intelligence and bloodlust of a predator. But the question remains, was Claudia's transformation an act of love? Or was it a tragic condemnation? To Louis, the vampire who would come to care for her, Claudia became the daughter he never had, a tragic reflection of his lost humanity. In his grief over the death of his mortal family, he sought to care for her as he would a child, protecting her from the dangers of the vampire world and trying to shield her from the torment that came with their existence. But this, too, was a form of prison. For how could a child trapped in an adult world ever find peace? Louis's attempts at kindness were noble, but they were also a cruel reminder of what Claudia would never have: freedom, growth, and the chance to truly live. To Lestat, the vampire who turned her, Claudia was nothing more than a toy, a perfect tool for amusement and cruelty. He saw in her not a child to protect, but a creature to control. A childlike appearance, combined with the power of an immortal predator, made her the perfect weapon, an innocent facade that could deceive and destroy with terrifying efficiency. But what Lestat failed to understand was that Claudia was no ordinary child. Her intelligence, her growing resentment, and her fierce desire for autonomy were far beyond what he had anticipated. She was becoming something more, something far darker and far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. As Claudia's mind matured, she began to grasp the full extent of her condition. She came to understand the true horror of her immortality. The mirror became her greatest enemy. Every time she gazed upon her reflection, she was reminded of the gulf between what she was and what she could never be. Her body remained small, fragile, a cruel mockery of the power she possessed. She was forced to confront the painful truth that she could never seduce, dominate, or live as the other immortals did. Her appearance, a constant reminder of her impotence, became an unbearable weight. Every moment spent in her child's body was a moment of torment. How could she be taken seriously in a world where age and appearance were synonymous with power? How could she, a tiny child with the mind of a predator, ever hope to have a place among the immortal elites? And the more Claudia struggled with this internal conflict, the more she began to unravel. Her desires, her instinctual thirst for freedom began to consume her, and she realized that the only way to escape her torment was to seize control of her fate, no matter the cost. What followed was a gradual but relentless transformation. Claudia's once playful, innocent demeanor gave way to a sharp, calculating ruthlessness. Her cruelty, her intelligence, and her ambition grew in tandem with her bitterness. She became a deadly predator, capable of outwitting even the most seasoned immortals, despite her small stature. Her child's body was no longer a weakness, it was a weapon, one that she could use to her advantage. As she grew more ruthless, more cunning, her thirst for vengeance became her driving force. She was no longer the innocent child who had been turned into a vampire by accident. She was a force to be reckoned with, a creature of darkness that would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. But the true tragedy of Claudia's story was that, despite her growing power, she remained forever trapped. She could never escape the prison of her eternal youth. Her mind, sharp as a blade, would continue to mature, but her body would never follow. Her desire for independence, for autonomy, for freedom from the cage that was her own body, was a desire that could never be fulfilled. From the moment Claudia was turned, Louis became her protector, her link to humanity, and the only one who cared for her in a world of vampires who saw her as a dangerous anomaly. Unlike Lestat, who treated her as little more than a pawn in his games, Louis loved her as a daughter. He tried to instill in her a sense of morality, to teach her the limits that even vampires should not cross. She knew that Louis's kindness was a weakness in a world that was ruled by power and cruelty, and as she grew more powerful and more resentful, she began to see Louis's protection as a prison of its own. Even he, the one person who had loved her unconditionally, became part of the system that had bound her. In the end, Claudia's story is a tragic reminder of the true cost of immortality. It is not just the endless hunger for blood that marks an immortal's cursite. It is the knowledge that time will never bring change, that the years will pass, and the world will continue to move forward, but the immortal will remain the same, trapped in a body that will never age, but with a mind that yearns for freedom. Claudia's fate is a tragic one, and her story is a cautionary tale for all those who seek immortality. This is a story of a creature torn between two worlds, the world of eternal youth and the world of endless power. And in the end, it is a story of a being doomed to forever yearn for what she can never have. Her love for her father was mixed with resentment, for he, unlike her, had a choice. While Louis tormented himself with guilt, Claudia sank deeper into darkness, becoming colder and more calculating. Their relationship became a game of conflicting emotions: love and anger, dependence, and the desire for freedom. Claudia knew that Louis would never abandon her, but she also knew that he would never have the courage to act against Lestat. So, she took matters into her own hands. She needed independence, and to achieve that, there was one obstacle in her way: the one who had given her immortality, her creator, her jailer, Lestat. It was then that Claudia, with her sharp mind and ruthless determination, began to devise a plan that would forever change the balance of power between them. If she wanted to be free, she had to kill her master. And this time, not even Lestat's cunning would save him from the monster he himself had created. Claudia knew that Lestat was powerful, manipulative, and nearly impossible to kill. But she also knew that he underestimated her intelligence. To him, she was just a little girl, an extension of his eternal amusement. And it was this arrogance that sealed his fate. Claudia planned everything down to the smallest detail, choosing the perfect moment to strike. She began poisoning him with the blood of the dead, weakening him little by little, something vampires could not consume without suffering terrible consequences. When Lestat was at his weakest, she did what no one dared to do. She attacked without hesitation. With a sharp blade and a killer instinct forged by years of frustration and hatred, Claudia slit his throat, leaving her master to bleed and writhe in agony. Horrified, Louis helped dispose of the body, throwing it into the dark waters of New Orleans. To Claudia, this was her first taste of true freedom. But death is never final for a creature like Lestat. Claudia's mistake was not just attempting to kill him, but believing he was truly dead. Months later, when everything seemed calm and she finally believed she had escaped her prison, Lestat emerged from the shadows. Deformed, starving, and consumed by the desire for revenge, he brought with him the terror she thought she had erased. Lestat's return was the beginning of Claudia's downfall. What started as a cry for freedom turned into an endless nightmare. Now, she and Louis had nowhere left to run, and immortality, which she once believed she could control, was about to become her greatest curse. With the return of Lestat and the looming threat of his vengeance, Claudia and Louis had no choice but to flee. They left New Orleans behind and embarked on a desperate journey across Europe. Claudia wasn't just running away. She was searching for answers, wanting to understand her own nature, to find others like her, and perhaps even discover if there was a way to change her fate. But the search for knowledge in the world of vampires wasn't just dangerous, it was a death sentence for those who asked the wrong questions. As they traveled from city to city, they walked through dark streets, decaying theaters, and forgotten libraries, investigating legends about ancient vampires, those who might hold the key to understanding their existence. Claudia wanted to know if any other vampire children had survived the passing of time, but the answer was always the same. Immortals like her weren't allowed to live for long. Her very existence was an anomaly against the unwritten laws of vampire society. This truth only fueled her anger and resentment. She felt betrayed by fate itself, a prisoner in a body that would never change. Louis, on the other hand, grew more concerned as Claudia's obsession grew. While he only wanted to survive and hide, Claudia sought to challenge everything the vampires held sacred. It was this relentless pursuit of answers that led them to Paris, the heart of a vampire society older and more deadly than anything they had encountered before. However, Paris didn't just offer knowledge, it marked the beginning of the end. There, Claudia found those who could understand her suffering, but also those who viewed her existence as an unforgivable crime. The refuge she so desperately desired would soon reveal itself as a deadly trap. Upon arriving in Paris, Claudia and Louis were drawn to a group of vampires unlike any they had encountered before. The Theater of Vampires, led by the enigmatic Armand and his cruel right-hand Santiago, was a macabre spectacle where humans unknowingly watched their own doom unfold. Vampires pretended to be humans playing vampires, a dark irony that both captivated and terrified the audience. Claudia saw in Armand a potential source of wisdom. He was ancient, powerful, and seemed to understand her pain in ways no other vampire ever had. But behind his deep eyes, there were secrets she still couldn't decipher. Louis, meanwhile, was drawn to Armand's magnetism, allowing himself to be swept up in his promise of a new purpose for their eternity. But even after his vengeance, Louis found no peace. Armand, who had silently manipulated events to rid himself of his rivals, offered Louis a new life by his side. But Louis knew the truth. Armand had never tried to save Claudia. He had allowed her to die so he could have Louis for himself, and that was unforgivable. Louis left, leaving Armand behind. He wandered the world, carrying with him the pain of loss and the burden of immortality. Claudia, his immortal daughter, had been taken from him in a brutal way, and nothing could ever fill the void her absence left. The curse of vampires was not just the thirst for blood, it was eternity without those they loved. Claudia became a legend among vampires, a tale of tragedy and revenge. A cruel reminder that, for the immortals, time does not heal wounds, it only deepens them. Claudia's story is not just a vampire. To Lee, it's a tragedy about fate, vengeance, and the curse of immortality. Trapped in a body that would never change, but with a mind that matured and yearned for freedom, she defied those who dared to control her. Her desire for independence led her to commit unthinkable acts, and her search for a place in the world ultimately sealed her fate. If there is anything Claudia teaches us, it's that immortality is not a gift, but a prison. Time, for vampires, is not an ally, it's a relentless enemy. In the end, even Louis' thirst for vengeance could not bring his daughter back. Claudia became a symbol of the cruelty of fate, a shadow in the history of vampires, eternally remembered, but forever lost. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Claudia and the dark universe of vampires, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. And if you want more terrifying and fascinating stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to not miss any content. The night holds many secrets, and we're here to reveal them. Until next time, creatures of the night.